Welcome back to the Iron Sights podcast. My guest today, Shane Foster of Guild Solutions and a lot of other things we're going to talk about. Shane, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for having me out here. I'm absolutely humbled and stoked.
Well, likewise. And this is very cool for me for a lot of reasons. One, your name got dropped several times by several people, but one of our very good friends, Chris Curris, was like, dude, you got to have Shane on the show. And that's who I'd heard about you or heard. He's the one who basically kind of put you on the radar for me. You do some very interesting things. You've done some very interesting things. And one of those things, letting the cat out of the bag for people that don't know who you are is, I think, and hopefully this isn't an insult in pinning you into a box, but I think people that know you as the breacher guy.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole history that we can talk about there, and then some technical stuff that I'm hoping you can kind of teach me about, because that's not something I have a lot of experience. I have zero experience with it outside of about like a 4-hour workshop with a Halligan and a ram on a door.
That's more than a lot of cops get. So that's pretty good.
That's actually a good point. And it was actually taught by a firefighter on a firearms range. It was also a firearms instructor. It was actually a really interesting time. Like experience for me. I learned a lot, and then it got me thinking. But outside of that, I don't know very much. Of course, I know Chris and what he's doing with the BRB and Good Dude Concepts, and been a huge proponent of that and helping him out. But my point of that is I'm hoping you can kind of walk me through some of that stuff today, maybe educate the listeners that both those that are kind of new to it or maybe don't really understand it, and also those that are deep into this part of lots of professions, but specifically the skill set, the knowledge set that exists there, and kind of maybe tease some things in their brain, maybe help them with some perspective and thinking about how they train and why they're training as we go through today. But that's getting ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that all of those payoffs, like Chris and the other, I kept dropping $100 bills to try to get on this. It paid off. It cost me a couple grand, but here I am, buddy, all the way in California. So
yeah, and so thank you for doing that. I know you're out here for a course, which is something. You are a road warrior, and you're out here to do that. And so the timing kind of worked out. And we actually got introduced at SHOT Show 2026. You are on basically the right coast. I'm on the left coast, and so logistically we're on two opposite sides of the country. But Chris is like, hey. You should chat with this guy. If there's room to get him in on the show while you're at SHOT Show, let's do it. And I think he was trying to get you to maybe jump into this collaboration we had done, but you were coming in later than when we had done that.
Yep. That's exactly right. It was, SHOT Show. SHOT Show is just, it's a
zoo.
Cesspool of nonsense and craziness, and also a lot of productive meetings. So yeah, but here we are, man. I'm super excited to be here. It's going to be a great week of training. I've been really excited about this conversation just for the fact that, like I told you earlier, I like the intellect that you bring out in the conversation, and it's not just a hype fest. It's actually something that hopefully is beneficial. So my thing to you is, man, thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me a voice to hopefully invest in people. And that's what it's all about. What can I say that hopefully brings knowledge and maybe making better human beings? That's it.
Man, thank you for saying that. It means a lot. And I'll try not to disappoint, and I'll do my best. And I'll also try not to get too hyped up about this, because going back to SHOT Show, when I go to that thing, I usually stay buried in a room, right? In a suite with a bunch of cameras, and I just have people rolling in and out. And I try to get a lot of work done there from the podcast perspective while I'm there. And I haven't done one since. I had mentioned this kind of off air. I took a step back. I was like, to what you just said right there about helping more people, getting the right message to them, helping them make some connections to some things, and providing good quality information about training, about where to go to be a better person, right? And to be a better whatever it is that you're trying to be. And then obviously give some really solid insights to whatever the specific skill sets or a knowledge that the guest might have, and make those connections for people. And I got really frustrated about kind of the information not getting to more people. And that might be a little bit selfish. And it's not about likes and shares. It was more about like, hey, how do I do a better job at putting it in more places? In order to do that, you got to work, right? There's a lot of work that goes into it. And this thing takes a lot of work anyway. And this is, it's been a labor of love for me. I don't make bunch of money doing this, right? I make money in my own business, which is health and fitness. And that's it. So this takes time from the family, takes time, out of the business, and ultimately costs money. And so I don't think I was being resentful. I think it was just like, if I don't focus on some things in order to make that happen, it's not going to happen. And I'm just going to be upset about it. And then that might take away from the show. And that would be doing a disservice to the listeners and the people that trust me. So having you said that, thank you. I'm super excited to do this, and I'm kind of coming at it with a new energy. So like I was saying, I'm going to try not to get too pumped up about this.
Man, I'm stoked. I think you got 3 types of podcasts if you narrow them down. You got entertainment podcasts, which are cool. They're fun. You got information podcasts. That's cool. And then you have accountability podcast. And accountability podcast is a podcast that challenge us to make us better people. And that's what you got here, man. So let's do it. We'll be accountable to our own words.
Okay. I appreciate that. So deal. And we're going to turn it right back to you then. Cool. And let's dig in a little bit. So I start this way a lot, and I want to learn more about you. I want the audience to learn a little bit more about you, just to set the groundwork. So for people that don't know you, this is going to be brand new information. And for some people that have maybe heard you or seen you before or taken one of your courses, obviously this might be a little bit of repeat, but maybe we can fold some stuff in there that they didn't know about you and keep this interesting for them. So you can start wherever you want, and then you can finish wherever you want. I may interrupt you a few times to kind of go down a couple rabbit holes, and it'll be my responsibility to bring it back to home base. But let's just talk a little bit about how kind of you got here. So that said, you can start where you want, but there's there's military in there. There's a law enforcement career in there. There's a corporate path in there. There's a business ownership and entrepreneurship. There's a coaching and a teaching element to this. There's so much stuff. We got a lot of ground to cover, man. So good luck on telling the Reader's Digest version here.
Yeah. So I often say it like this. A lot of people's careers are very linear. Right. You start off in the military, you go into law enforcement, and then maybe the training comes later on. I'm going to take a lot of heat for this one, but my career is like a starfish, and that can be taken a lot of wrong ways, but it's very much like that. So the skinny version, jump in wherever you want, Scott, is 14 years full-time law enforcement, did a few years as a reserve as well. I was also with the National Guard. Started off doing the security forces thing, didn't know what I didn't know, trained into a special missions enabling unit, a fast team. There I deployed into Europe, deployed into the Middle East, went to Yemen, Afghanistan, some places like that.
Okay.
All together with law enforcement, the crux of my experience was from a Metro Memphis agency. I don't have to tell you, Memphis is a little bit of what we call the armpit or the asshole of the United States of America, which also led to a lot of great experiences with a lot of great people. And so from that just kind of escalated my career. In the middle of that, there was a slight break where I got involved in the ministry. Not in that world now. So if I drop a cuss word, don't start throwing a bunch of hate at me.
I don't judge.
But I was also involved in a Fortune 500 company. I was involved in the loan side. I've been involved in entrepreneurship. And then I got involved in starting my own company, of course, we'll talk about. But along with that, also, I am part owner or owner in 5 companies. In some different capacity, some very, very minor parts, some large parts. And then Avon Protection, the gas mask, not the makeup. Everyone gets them confused. Check them out, all the cool gas masks out there. And then Team Wendy as well. So that's kind of the big snapshot. But it started many, many years ago in law enforcement. And all together, either teaching it or doing it. I've been in this for over 2 decades. So I don't know it all, but I've learned a little bit in all those times of teaching or being operational that hopefully now I can help people out there to become better humans and better at their job.
Well, the word on the street is you're doing a pretty good job with that.
Oh, thank you.
And I think, again, you going through the snapshot there, the quick rundown resume or LinkedIn, if you want to call it that, that provides a lot of context to some of the directions we're going to go. And that's what makes you very interesting to me, because it's not just the one thing. There's many things. And I think the reason you have been as successful and the company and your team is being successful and the people that leave your courses and have interacted with you are being successful, because that's the feedback that I've been getting and the intel that I've kind of tried to gather
super humbly
is because of all of that. It is, we see people, oftentimes I have folks on the show, they come from different backgrounds, but there's some common themes. I talked to a lot of law enforcement and it it may be over a couple of different agencies, but in that sense, it is kind of linear, and they have some opportunities to do some cool stuff, and then maybe they get into something maybe more specialized, which is kind of the theme of the topic that we might be talking about. Maybe it's the shooting side. Some people come for the shooting stuff. Right? We're talking to the comp shooters or folks that are instructors, and talking about, hey, how do you become a better shooter? Here's some, what are the tips and tricks kind of thing, but also what are the fundamentals and how do you teach those, and how do you impart those on other folks to get them to walk away and be better. But this one is different for me because of the starfish analogy.
A little bit everywhere.
And the other thing about that is, as we get into the company, so we're going to talk about Guild Solutions. We're going to talk about the Guild. We're going to talk about Pryme Infill. I think that's a big one. And some of the things you're doing there and your background and how it's tied in, and how smart it is that you are involved in so many of those things. Because I look at things, I say this a lot, so I apologize to people listening to me all the time. I look at things like in Venn diagrams, like you see the circle, right? And then that touches other circles, and that touches other circles, and touches other circles. And if you're going to build a business, it's kind of much like how I built the fitness business that I own. It's like, hey, it's fitness in the middle, right? But here's all the other things that it touches and all the other market segments that it touches. And if you really want to make an impact, right, you've got to be very well rounded, and you have to look at where those opportunities are. Absolutely. And how do you leverage those. And you've been very smart about that. So I think we're going to uncover some of that stuff.
Yeah. And, Dave Ramsey says something that I like. He says, when you find a way that you can be successful, where a lot of people mess up is they get horizontal. Well, now you get outside of your realm of success. Why has Scott been successful? Well, it's fitness. This is who you are. This is a part of your being. Breaching in law enforcement is a part of who I am. It's a part of my being. So we could do two things. We could go completely horizontal and get outside of our influence, or we can start drilling down. And so when I look at my career I didn't retire from law enforcement like 25 years, but I've been in that vein now for 20 plus years in some capacity. And to your point, I think that's exactly where success has come from, because I just have found new oil reserves to tap into and to frack it out if you can.
Yep.
And then that's allowed another reserve to take me down another lane. And I haven't been scared to say, yeah, you know what, let's try this. And if I fail, I fail. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, I think that's the mentality you have to go into it with, especially as an entrepreneur. Like, the failure is not an option, but you recognize that it could happen, right? But if you're not focused on that, you're focused on making it work.
Pivot.
Yeah, you figure it out. And again, if you're constantly drilling, right, and you're constantly going down, you're going to find new things that you're going to discover new things that you have to explore. So let's wind it back, because again, going back through all of those different things, you've had an opportunity to look at all of these things, or many, many things with many different lenses. And so let's talk about the law enforcement lens just to kick it off. So just real briefly, like, how did you get into law enforcement?
Yeah, I was a turd. So
that's interesting. It's usually one of two ways. I have a lineage, right? Like my grandfather's grandfather, and then it's just what it is. Or I was a troubled young man who saw the other side of the law and then decided I didn't want to be there anymore, and I wound up on the right side of it somehow.
Well, I have an absolute, when I say a man's man, one of the finest human beings that's ever walked the face of the planet was my grandfather.
Okay.
He was a World War II vet. He was a 2ID vet. He was a medic. Actually was supposed to go in infantry, and they thought enough of him that they pulled him into the medic side. My other grandfather, who I never met, he was also a Navy veteran. So I had that lineage as far as from the grandfather standpoint in the military. But Dad was a pastor. It was a smaller church, but everybody knows everybody. And in a smaller town, a few thousand people. And I wasn't a mean-spirited kid. I was just typical, egging cars, running from cops.
Well done a little bit of that, man.
I am one of the only human beings you'll probably ever meet that TP'd an entire neighborhood from a Cessna 182.
I did a lot of TPing, but I never did it from an airplane.
Yeah. Took the church Lowe's card, not Lowe's, Sam's. And we bought one of those massive packs of toilet paper, and my buddy had his license. Stall that dude out to 80 miles an hour over Halloween night.
Just let him rip.
Just let him rip, tater chip. So did that. So again, not a bad kid, wasn't into drugs and all that stuff, but I was ornery. And so that led down a path of getting in a little bit of trouble. And there was a particular cop that took me under his wing. And man, I'm going to talk about this guy till the day I die. And Todd is an amazing human being, took me under his wing, showed me there was a different way and a different side. And that's really what got me bit into law enforcement. And that's where I initially got my start. And I was like, well, I'm tired of running from them. So if you can't beat them,
join them.
You might as well join them.
Yep.
And so that's where it started. Of course, there wasn't a formal SWAT team, but I got involved in their little makeshift high crime suppression team.
Okay.
And then, of course, that escalated. A short period of time, I was involved in the ministry. I've talked about that. Mm-hmm. And I was involved in a Fortune 500 company, Sallie Mae to be exact.
Okay.
The whole loan consolidation world did that.
I was there.
Yeah. Yep. And then just missed the brotherhood. I love what J-Bo says. He says, man, you'll never miss the circus, but you'll miss the clowns. And I missed the clowns. And then from there, I got back into it and then spent another decade in law enforcement, actually a little more then. And during that time, I was involved in SWAT. I was involved as a TFO. I was involved in a traffic unit. I was involved in numerous things from, Homeland Security, and then eventually had an opportunity to work for a privatized training company, which is, I know we're getting ahead, but that's where the whole breaching thing really started for me. And then when I left law enforcement full-time, still stayed on as reserve, I left as a sergeant. So I had several years learning how to be a leader inside of law enforcement.
Okay. So what I heard you say was there was a lot of experiences throughout the career. And so it's been over 2 decades in it somehow. Yep. Right. And part of that, there was a couple of different agencies there, mm-hmm. right? Smaller agency, and then maybe a mid-size, or was this a larger agency? 3
altogether. Yeah. So I worked for an agency. It was probably 150-ish.
Okay.
Worked for an agency that was only 26.
Okay.
And then I worked for an agency that had several hundred.
Okay.
And so completely different.
Yep.
And that's a conversation we could have for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But just understanding the roles and responsibilities in a small agency versus a large agency is unbelievable.
Yeah, there's levels to everything, right? And then within the levels, there's other levels. Mm-hmm. And I think this shocked me when I first heard it, that like 70% of the agencies across the United States are 25 officers or less.
Yeah,
I think it's actually 80.
Yeah, I would say it's closer to like 80, 86% are very small.
So that said, like those agencies are doing a lot of things. You're doing traffic stops. You're also doing criminal investigations. You're doing, welfare checks. You're doing, there's all kinds of things that could be happening.
Oh yeah.
Right. Versus maybe when you get into a larger agency, it tends to be more like you're more, I don't want to say specialized. That's probably not the right word, but you're doing one thing probably most of the time. Yeah. It's patrol, right? Or it's on a special unit. You're again, it's traffic, it's investigations, mm-hmm. it's whatever it might be on some specialized unit. And there's probably pros and cons to both. But maybe one of my questions is like within those experiences, if you had like to go back and start over again, if you're going to do it all over again, which agency would you, what size of agency or which agency would you choose first? Maybe that question is a little too pointed in terms of what agency, because maybe you hated one of those. But my point is in terms of your, like those 3 levels, like which one was if you had to start over again, which would you have chosen?
That's a tough to say because of the fact that number one, you learn so much more about the full roundedness of the occupation at a small agency.
Okay.
Now, if I had to choose, then I'm going to go to a mid-size agency.
Okay. If
you go to a large agency such as MPD, Memphis PD, that metropolitan area, great agency, a lot of good dudes in there. They've had their problems, but there's a lot of good guys. The problem is you can just easily get lost.
Okay.
It's 22, 24, Broward County, 5,500. Just get lost. You do your thing. You roll out. Where in a small agency, man, you learn investigations. I mean, there was times I was legit doing SWAT call outs where we're going inside of a trailer and I'm taking a makeshift sledgehammer and beating in a door.
You use big air quotes for those people that are listening to SWAT call outs. Yeah.
Not all SWAT teams are created equal. That's a conversation too. And then 3 hours later, you're working a fatality on a train track, in the same shift. Where on, like you said, to a larger agency, your roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, and typically you don't deviate that much from them. But if I had to, mid-size agencies are where it's at. And here's my reasoning for those that work for a big or small agency that's going to throw shade. A mid-size agency gives you the ability to lateral left, right, up and down, still expand, still get operational experience.
Mhm.
And that's important because you'll get a guy that's been on so-and-so agency for 25 years. And he's like, I've been a cop for 25 years. I'm like, that's awesome, man. I was on SWAT too. And I was like, that's awesome, man. Fantastic. And then you look into it and you figure out they did 2 call outs a year.
Yep.
Well, compared to maybe an agency I was at or like a Rochester, New York, well, they have more call outs in 6 months than you had in your 22-year career.
Right.
So we can't say that the experience is the same, but the roles and responsibilities are slightly different. So mid-size agency, that's the sweet spot, that 200, 300, 400, something like that, because you still can get out there and spread your wings and fly. At the same time, you're still getting real world experience, but you don't get lost in the shuffle.
So I going back to those experiences, I wonder at what point do you recognize as a law enforcement officer that I'm getting really good training or I'm not getting good training? Because I think this plays into a larger part of the conversation we're going to have today. And maybe in restating the question, it's at what point do you realize, oh boy, like this, I just got exposed to something that just made the lens very clear here and the real world to me very clear about we as a profession are not getting it. Maybe it's you're finding out at that agency we're not getting it. But where does this, I guess, realization of like this could be done so much better and it needs to be so much better come, which ultimately drives some of the other things that you've done? Was it while you were a cop or was it while you were maybe kind of transitioning and working with the corporate world? Okay.
Definitely a cop. I think it comes down to exposure. You know, you'll hear us say all the time, you know, that's the way we've always done it,
Sure.
being the most dangerous words in law enforcement. But you don't know that's the way we've always done it until you have exposure outside of the way that we've always done it. You don't even know what sunk cost fallacy is until you've been a victim of sunk cost fallacy. You don't understand what overgeneralization fallacies are until you've been a victim of those things. And how do you find that? Well, you got to get outside the box.
Mm.
If you live, you know, here's a simple analogy, Scott. If I took your hand and I wrote, you don't know this, but I write Scott on your hand and I bring it all the way up to your eyeball. And then all of a sudden I open your hand up right in front. I'm like, hey, read what's on your hand. You're like, I don't know. I'm too close to it. That's it.
Yeah. Got it.
You're so close to the situation. You're so close to your little bubble in your agency. All you know is North Mississippi. All you know is Louisiana. All you know is Northeast, you know, Maine or whatever. You can't even read your hand. So the way to uncover that is to get outside the box, which is why we always encourage people. Don't just stick with one vein of training. Even if you learn bad training, you're still learning the things that you shouldn't be doing.
Mm.
So go train with others. And then you should, through logic and data and historical context, be able to then decipher what is relevant, what is lawful, what is good, what is bad, and so on and so forth.
The critical thinking piece. Yep. So I wonder, what experience did you have where that became crystal clear to you?
I don't know that I have one.
There's one. Okay.
I would say there's 3 or 4. One, I won't say the school out of respect, but there was one that's in the central part of Mississippi where there was some good training there. It was a regional training academy. Okay. And some of them were really good and some of them were rough. And I could tell they were just pulling Jimbo in because Jimbo wanted to teach.
Gotcha.
And that was a part of it. And I would also like to preface the fact that, you know, I came with a background of teaching even before law enforcement. I've been involved from being the co-captain of a basketball team, I've heard some of the most phenomenal speakers in the world. So I've been teaching almost 25 years. And so when you hear someone who can't teach and they're not connecting with you and they're not bringing you into a conversation, it's not going organic, and you're like, why the hell am I here? Mm-hmm. That's all kinds of red flags. And for me, when I started hearing that, like, dude, I'll tell you what my grandfather said that my daddy said he said, because I never met him. I cannot hear what you say, for what you do speak so loud, I can't hear what you say. And when I heard people speak and teach like that, I'm like, I'm wasting my time and probably wasting their time. And that's unfortunate. And that set a standard in my life to say, I want to be better. I want to communicate better.
So it comes from the training experience, right? And so I think that's maybe we talk about that a little bit, because I think there's, just because you can do the thing doesn't mean you can't teach the thing. That comes up a lot. And just because you want to teach the thing doesn't necessarily mean you should be teaching the thing. And I look to coaches or instructors, teachers, whatever silo you want to put them in, whatever makes sense and whatever makes you feel good. I think they're all doing similar things, but they're not all the same thing. Like coaching and teaching are different. I think I've had some really great teachers that were also great coaches, and I've had some great coaches that were also great teachers. So I think that the difference, and I kind of look back, it's like, well, what made them this way? And so that's the question I have for you. Maybe what makes a good coach? What makes a good instructor? Because I think there's some critical components there. I'm curious on kind of what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I think there's 3 or 4. Number one, I mean, you have to have experience. That matters. That always comes up. Number 2, probably the one that we don't really talk about, and I'm not talking about false humility. I mean, the real deal.
Real kind. Yeah.
I think you have to have humility. If you're not willing to say, I'm sorry, if you're not willing to say my bad, or here's one, I don't know.
Yep.
You're off. And I think the third one is the pursuit of excellence.
Yeah. The wanting to be challenged. Yeah.
That's it. And I've been fortunate to make a little bit of money. I'm not very rich, but I've made some good livings. And I will say that has never been a motivating factor for me. Whether I was making 200 or 300,000, that's never been my motivating factor. I mean, do you want to make a good living? Of course you do. But to me, the gauge of success is, number one, personal accomplishment, but it's also, how do your students come back and say, you impacted my life? And that's not a metric that happens in 1 month, 6 months. That may be 16 years later. I'm now training 3rd and 4th generation breachers in the agency. The guys that I started off training are now the captains and the sheriffs, and they're bringing their dudes to the guild because I impacted them. And to me, that is one of those things that it makes me so hungry and it fulfills me.
Yeah, it has to be that return on investment has to be realized in that way too, I think, or you burn yourself out. You know, you're constantly searching for the next contract or the next dollar or whatever it happens to be. Now, I guess the way I look at this is that's a very subjective measurement. And the only way to understand it is if you're looking for it and you're asking for it. You that goes back to the humility piece. Like showing up and teaching the 3-day course or the 1 day or whatever, the 8 hours, whatever it is that you're doing, and then moving on to the next one without ever going back. I think it should be happening in real time, right? That's what good coaches do, is like, is my student getting this, right? How do I know? I need to ask them. It's not just what I'm observing, right? But what are they telling me? What are they articulating to me? And that needs to happen in real time. But I think it comes to like, how am I continually checking in? And that is a lot of work. That's a lot of work to do. And you'll see that kind of manifest if you're going back to the same places. And that might be a measurement, like, well, they're inviting me back, so I might be doing something right. But the question I would always have is, why are you inviting me back? Like, what is it that we're doing? What is it that I'm doing? And more importantly, is there something I could be doing better? And because if I'm just coming back and I'm just giving you the next thing, whatever it is, and I haven't checked in first, then all I'm giving you is what I think you need. I'm not giving you what you're telling me you need.
Yeah.
And I think that gets missed a lot in this larger space that we're talking about in terms of teaching or coaching law enforcement, military, whatever it is. And those are 2 very different things, by the way, right? In civilians, those are very, very different people. Those are very, very different goals, needs, connections to the thing, resources that they have available. So yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts on it.
So we love cliches in this industry, whether you call it first responder industry, military industry, the industry as a whole. We love cliche words, and we throw those out all the time. I'm not.
It almost becomes nomenclature.
It's silly. It's silly. It's like, and this is no shade on these guys. I'll say their name. You know, like GBRS comes out with the shirt, "Be a pro," and then all of a sudden that becomes the phrase, right? Cool, whatever. But nobody stops a lot of times to ask why.
What is it? Yeah, and what does that mean?
So when we say measurable, observable, and repeatable, it must be measurable, reservable, and repeatable. You know, it's like we're Richard Nixon over here, you know.
Right.
And I'm like, wait a minute, let's stop and assess what that actually means. And let's go back to the measuring piece. A lot of times we are doing training, but a lot of trainers don't even understand what a KPI is. They don't even know what a key performance indicator is. They don't even have an assessment tool. how do you know that they're actually learning? Is it because they replicated and regurgitated? Well, now all we have is absolutes because all they're doing is replicating what you're doing. You're a breacher dad, right? Well, there needs to be more than just replication. There needs to be context, and the why needs to be behind it. So one of the things that I think for us, at least at the Guild, is we talk about there's always concepts over absolutes because everything has some type of measurable assessment that can determine we go this way or this way. And ultimately, we have to be able to process that information and make the closest decision to the right decision, because I don't think there ever is a perfect decision.
Do you think law enforcement does a good job at that?
No.
Why?
Culture.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah. Culture. I'm going to try not to knock your cord off here. I think culture as a whole, and there are some great agencies, let me caveat and say, I couldn't even tell you how many agencies I've trained, hundreds, maybe thousands at this point, definitely thousands of personnel. Been very fortunate, very blessed to train those guys. But for the most part, in my experience, I would probably put a number around 80%. The culture is absolutely messed up. And the reason I think that there's such a problem with culture is, number one, you have this operational group, and then you have this executive group. And then what you don't have is a mesh between the two. I'm going to throw a shout out to him because I love his book. It's one of my favorite all-time books, and that is Pete Blaber's The Mission, the Men and Me.
Yep.
Love Pete.
Twice.
Pete, you still ain't responded to my message. I'm going to hate you for that, but I'm going to love you forever. And I know he's just on a big podcast recently too. It's a phenomenal book, but he's got a new book out.
Okay.
And I think this is where we miss it, and that is common sense leadership. We are so indoctrinated by policy. We're so indoctrinated, again, by that's the way we've always done it. We're so indoctrinated by these fallacies. And a good example is, here's one for you, talking about when a helmet is struck by a round. So if it does not go through that helmet and it creates an indention, that's called backface deformation. How many people in the last 30 years do we know that have ever died from backface deformation?
I mean, you're asking a guy who has no idea.
Yeah. Well, if you talk to most cops, and I go all over the country and I teach this for Team Wendy, still do to this day, they all will say, I've heard of backface deformation. None of them know what V50 is, RTP is. They all know what backface deformation is.
Okay.
But the answer is zero. But we have perpetuated that argument for years and years and years because that's my religion.
Gotcha.
Scott, that's something sacred. And so to go back to the answer, I think if you had to put it in just one or two categories, is number one is we love to perpetuate the lies, because if we expose the wrong thing,
there's consequence.
There's consequences. And really that consequences is just eating our own ego.
Yep.
That's it.
Just having to admit that you were wrong.
The other day,
this was wrong.
Yeah. We have this internal ethos, and you'll see us throw it out there.
Yep.
Ego is the enemy of success.
Ego is the enemy of success.
And I know that's been out for a long time, but that's something we truly try to live. There was a particular Instagram the other day, and I'm sure it was a little jab towards us, and that's cool. Whatever, man. But
really, that's happening out there?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. But they put ego is the enemy, ... and then F that, kick in the door like God sent you. And I'm like, number one, I don't think God would say F that. So let's start there. Number two is that is the mentality and the wrong approach. It doesn't mean that you have to be weak. If anything, you should be a stronger man, because you have to know your own weakness, your own insecurities, your own inefficiencies.
Yep.
To be a stronger human being, to identify those things and then strengthen yourselves. So I think ego comes down to it. I think the culture as a whole is perpetuating the same lives, and we don't want to step back because that hurts a lot of feelings, and that's religion.
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. I think it hurt feelings, ego. And so, in a profession where I think that's easy to agree with. Like, I think a lot of people immediately would agree with, that makes sense. Like, ego is the enemy of success. Like, that sounds right. That sounds like the right thing to do. However, operationalizing that, right, in a culture where we've always done it this way, so this is the way we do it. You've got leadership that's going to be pushing back on that for multiple different reasons, because it means work if we have to address this. It means people aren't going to like me, right, or like the decisions that are going to have to be made if we have to address this. how do you build that psychology, right?
Mhm.
And get people out of that mindset. I mean, you've been to a lot of places, and maybe you can compare and contrast this to
Mhm.
the difference between inside the institutional law enforcement and the corporate world, with regard to culture and culture change. I have some thoughts on that, but I'm curious what yours are. Like, how do you make it work? How do you change that psychology? Because I think that in law enforcement, what I hear, and this is something I actually, interesting talking about shade. It didn't happen publicly. It happened through a DM where, somebody hit me and said, "Hey man, like I love your show. I love what's going on there, but talking, about shit about the problems and the leadership all the time is not very helpful. What we should be talking about is how to change it." I'm like, I think what you saw maybe was a clip and you didn't listen to the entire podcast, because that's
Context.
all we're talking about during there is like, okay, but, and damn it, like if I thought the good meat and potatoes was gonna get attention to the podcast, like I would put that out as a clip. But you know what? The world is telling me, you're telling me that's not what you want to hear. And that's not what you want to see, because nobody listens to that stuff. Nobody likes it. Nobody shares it. And that is the world we live on in social media. And my thing is not about likes and shares. It's about getting the message out. But that means you got to get likes and shares to get the message out, right?
Mhm.
So my point in my kind of, it wasn't really a rebuttal. It was just kind of a statement
Mhm.
the guy was making. I was like, hey man, I'm not sure if you listened to the entire episode, but that's what we talked about in this particular episode. I think that you're referencing here. And the my point being is there's a lot of talk, and it gets attention, right? About how leadership sucks, and you shouldn't be promoted if you're this, and you shouldn't be promoted if you're that. And the problem with law enforcement is leadership, the gold, the gold badges and the gold bar people, and they just don't get it and they won't get it. And I'm like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to sit here and talk about it. I have no room to talk. Like I just see what I see, I
Mhm.
observe what I observe, but I do recognize there's an issue there because I hear about it a lot. And again, everybody's talking about it. Every podcast is talking about it, or every social media page is talking about it. Not every, but it's a blanket statement. I digress. My point is changing that psychology.
Mhm.
Okay. So if we admit that there's a problem, there's some problems there, but what are they, and how do you change that psychology institutionally? And again, I get going back to my question, and I'll wrap it up. And that is, like, maybe you can compare and contrast kind of what you've seen inside law enforcement and your experience there in training law enforcement. You're personally as a law enforcement officer, but also being actively involved in training
Mhm.
them, and kind of the corporate world, and how those cultures different, and how maybe the corporate world does it differently and change it in maintaining culture versus law enforcement.
Yeah. So the culture world is incredibly cutthroat, as you know. Um, Here in your neck of the woods, just recently, I was having a conversation with the owner of Pryme, and he was telling me how cutthroat this particular company at Silicon Valley is. They intentionally will hire a sales rep for 2 years, give them a number that's attainable. They'll hit the number, give them a number that's almost not
Oh,
attainable.
I've lived that.
And then all of a sudden, third year, you didn't get, boom, you're
You're
gone.
gone. Mhm.
And then they bring in a new guy. And that's just the way it is. That doesn't work for what we are and who we are in the law enforcement military culture. It just doesn't work. We want people to stay because that experience of staying is the next generation, and it starts feeding down into it. And hopefully we build each other up so that they're not starting at one, they're starting at 3, 4, 5, so they can break the ceiling later in their career. So the first thing I think is you got to have time. That's the hardest thing. Um, time is one of those things that you just have to almost outlive certain things. Sean Silvers with the Yield. He talks about all ins, half ins, and not ins.
Mm.
I've mentioned that before. All ins, I've always been an all in. When I'm committed to something, that's why I'm obsessed about preaching. I mean, to the point it's not healthy. Other dudes are staying up late at night watching some hub thing, and I'm over here watching how doors are made. And my wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm
Right.
like, "Nothing."
Yeah.
She's like, "You looking at breaching?" It's a running joke.
The long time in the bathroom is you sitting there looking at door construction and yeah, got it.
If you grab that phone right now and you scroll every phone, you'll not see one.
What's Home Depot selling today? Yeah.
I have pictures of my hands up to hinges for references, and it's psychotic.
Gotcha.
So I think number one is you have to have the all ins, and then you're always going to have the not ins. That's just a part of life and culture. It goes back thousands of years
I agree
ago.
with you. Yeah, I agree 100%.
And then, of course, the battle is for the half ins. And so how do we do that? Well, we do that through a couple things. Number one is standards.
Hmm.
Standards matter. You cannot hold a standard one day and then not for another. I mean, I've had guys that I pissed off within the company. I'm like, dude, you can't do this because you didn't meet this standard, whether it's a physical standard, whether it's an emotional standard, that matters. And then I think the third thing is if we really want to change the culture, you've got to change yourself. Your message should be a mirror or reflection of what you're preaching and who you are as a person. And a lot of times we do a lot of talking, we don't do a lot of walking. And those are things that I think that the inconsistency over time is where we lose it. And people's like, I'll just get out or I'll just leave. And for the record, I never left any law enforcement agency in a bad term. I sat with the sheriff, the leadership, said, I love you. Thank you so much. And have a great relationship with many of those individuals today, because I think that's so important. But I don't think it's a simple answer, but I think it's an attainable answer. I think it's something that we can change the culture in time. And it always starts with personal accountability. It starts with the people that want to change it. What are you doing about it to make yourself the best version of yourself? We would rather just bitch, gripe, and complain versus actually to become better human beings, so that when we do get the opportunity, then we're able to change the culture. So personal accountability is huge.
Yeah. So I love that. And so I'm going to ask you a tough question, and that is, like, give me an example of that. So let's jump back to the ego piece, because that's a huge part of the culture, right? And it can either, I think ego can be healthy, right? I think it can be healthy when it's understood. And I think that's the part of the issue, is that people don't necessarily understand their ego. They don't understand the things that are fueling it, that impact it or affect it. And there's this whole concept of self-worth, right, versus self-esteem. And like, where am I getting that from? Like, where does that come from? And I look at institutions like law enforcement. It's many others, but it's in this one, based on what you just said, I think, again, what is my self-worth versus what is my self-esteem? And that self-worth or the self-esteem ends up coming from other places, right? It's like, what are people telling me about myself, right? Yeah. And I start to build into that, and that becomes my persona, right? Or in my self-worth, is more like, well, how do I feel about myself, and what am I actually putting out? And those things are not always in alignment. So I'm curious about you, just specifically give me an example of ego for yourself where you had to check your own, or where it may have become a problem for you, or you recognized it was getting in front of you at some point, at any point where you have to step back. How do you examine it? How do you check your own ego? How do you stay humble and again, with humility?
So I think one of the most powerful things we can have is people in our life that we're accountable to and that are accountable to us. And I have 3 buddies that are my inner circle. They can tell me I'm being an arrogant son of a bitch. They can tell me you're out of line. And there was one particular situation, to give context to it. We were at a conference, and there was a guy that came up. He messed up. It was completely on him. But I was the one running the show. I was the boss. And I did not handle that situation the way I should have. He spit it off something at me, and I snapped back at him. Lost it. And I'll just say it. J-Bo came to me. I said, man, how'd I handle that? He said, I love you, bro, but pretty shitty. I was like, ow. and so I was like, but you're right. I went to that person. I rectified it. Me and that person are still great friends to this day. So I think number one is you have to have people that can truly speak into your life. I think that's very important. Not many of us in law enforcement have that. We're so, in military too, and just in the alpha male community. It can be anything out there where we are afraid that if we expose ourselves, that now we're weak or we lose reputability or whatever. But that's important. You got to have that inner circle. Whether you believe in the Bible, you don't believe in the Bible, the great story of David in the cave of Adullam, I think, is powerful. You got this dude who's been anointed a king, just a historical story here. He's anointed a king. He knows that he's next in line. And yet this dude named Saul picks up a spear and is trying to kill him. So he has no other choice but to flee to a cave of Adullam. And even though God himself has anointed this dude, he's now a shepherd. He's now in a cave. He's worthless at this point in his life. But the Bible talks about broken, discombobulated, discontented men that were former warriors came around him. He was accountable to them, and they were accountable to him. And that together created one of the greatest fighting forces in historical times. And if you put that context, that's what's important, I think, is we got to have people that we're accountable to and that they're accountable to us. I think the next thing that is so imperative when you talk about personal assessment is to constantly evaluate your press report and then don't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yep.
Don't believe your press report. It's a nice dopamine drop, isn't it, Scott? But when it's said and done, like I've been, and it's silly, but I've been called the Gandalf of breaching, or I'm breacher daddy, or I'm whatever. And those are nice sentiments, and I appreciate it. And thank you for the listeners out there. But I would never call myself a master breacher, because the moment a new door comes out, I'm now a student again. I'm back to being a white belt.
Yep.
So I could go on that rant for a long time, but I think there's a lot of different keys for personal self-reflection, introspection, and things like that.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that question. And I wanted to hit you with that because I think, I think it's a very solid point. And I think when we look at these institutions, and again, we're sort of, the theme right now is on the law enforcement side because you're so connected to it. And somehow I've gotten fairly connected to it as well in talking to different leaders and all the people, in the rank and file that kind of come down the different levels. And I think that the interesting thing that I see is that when you get to a certain level, you get to you get a choice, like who you're going to surround yourself with. And to me, what it looks like, and I think you're looking at this if you want to shuttle this over to politics, right, in our institution of government, whether that's at city council level, whether that is at the governor level, or state level, or whether that's at the national level. Look, there is I want to build a team, but who are you choosing, man? Like, are you choosing people that are going to do those things for you? Like, I know I can trust this person to make a good decision on these particular things. Yeah, but is this person going to hold me accountable to the things that I need to be held accountable to, and vice versa? Can I do that with them? Because if I'm just like, well, I need this person to do it because I don't want to deal with it, right? And they're better than me at it. Great, yeah, put the smartest people in the room together, but it's a two-way street, right? And I think, like, when I see the most dysfunctional leadership teams in whether it's law enforcement or anywhere else, it's often mired in nepotism and a complete disconnect from reality. And there is no connection to, again, the rank and file and whatever that institution happens to be. And then that just breeds more of the same thing, because now you're
confirmation bias.
Now you're teaching them what they need to do at those lower levels. And then these little factions get started, and then you have issues. And changing a culture that's already like that, I don't think it's impossible, dude.
Takes time.
That takes time, a lot of patience, and a lot of resolve, right? To have to work through that, a lot of banging your head against the, against the wall, trying to figure it out without taking things personally, because it's not the cult. You are not going to be able to change culture by yourself, right? And you can't be that. I don't know, that warrior that's out there. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this. No, it's a we problem, and you have to surround yourself with people that understand that. And when I look at it, from the outside looking in. I look at it as like, man, you're pretty wrapped up right now. You're pretty wound tight. Maybe is the right term. You're wound tight about this thing. I think maybe what you need to do is kind of step back for a little bit and think about that and just chill. Yeah, exactly. With the looking at your hand in front of your face.
Yeah.
Let's re-examine this a little bit. I love the energy, right? I love the intention, but to your point, like going back to J-Bo and asking him how to handle that, you're handling it pretty shitty, man.
Yeah.
Like it's not the right.
It hurts. It stings. But I mean, that's, and the other thing has been done on my side to him. And that's just an example. I've got 2 or 3 good men. That goes back to, Scott, of making sure your circle is not just what you want, but what you need. And I think that's a big thing, because I said it earlier, we love confirmation bias. Like if I want to run this particular RDS red dot site and I want everybody in the agency to run that with me, what do? I go to everybody that really either likes me or likes that.
Yeah.
Well, then I don't look at the opposition. Well, one of the greatest ways that you can actually learn a skill set is to understand the opposition to the skill set, because that founds you, that roots you, that grounds you in why you believe what you're believing.
It's logical thinking. Yeah. You have to see both sides. So this is a good place to transition then. Let's talk about the guild. Okay. Right? Let's talk about what it is that you do. There's many things that the guild does. I said this, and I didn't want to pin you into to a corner with just the breaching stuff, because it's not just breaching. That's again what you might the world might know you as is the breacher guy, right? But let's talk about the guild. Let's talk about who you guys are, what it is that you're doing, who it is that you're working with, how you're working with them, and I want to know about how you built it. And I think because it will circle back to, I think, everything that we've just talked about for probably the last 40 minutes. Yep.
Well, when I started this idea of the guild, first and foremost, one thing I've learned about entrepreneurship is true entrepreneurs, not the people that love the word and the title, right? Because everybody's an entrepreneur anymore. It's like a buzzword.
Just put whatever you want in your Instagram bio, and you're that.
But they're always willing to do something different than others. They find when you look at lynda.com, which is the roots of linkedin.com, it was just a school teacher trying to pump a bunch of information out there, and that's where LinkedIn learning came from. It's an amazing story. So when I looked at things like that, I was like, man, what can we do it's another training company, but what can we do to be different? And the way I felt was, and I'm not comparing myself to this dude by any means, but for context, I've only met him one time at SHOT Show when we were taking a piss next to each other, and that's Ben Stoker. So one thing I do admire about Ben's never been a cop like yourself. He's never been law enforcement. He's never been military. He's not soft, but you go talk to the unit, you go talk to Dev, you go talk to MARSOC. A lot of those guys have trained under Ben. Why? Because Ben became one of the most prominent sought after shooters in the entire world. You cannot argue with his success. And so I said, hey, look, the fact is that Shane, yeah, I've got some good experience, some good operational experiences, some good stories, and et cetera, et cetera. But when it's said and done, there's always going to be somebody cooler. It's done more. That's something. But what I can do is I can dig down deep and become this subject matter expert on a very technical aspect. And that's what I've done. And so the first thing is I said, okay, I become the catalyst. I'm the center. The next thing is, what if I could create this kingdom where I don't have to control it all? And so then I began to pick and choose individuals that I knew were very capable. Well, if you go back 500 years, a guild, what it really was is, hey, we're going to start a new community. Hey, we need a good farmer. We need a warrior. Hey, we need someone that understands how to do leather, someone that knows how to hunt. And we bring all these skill sets together and we create this community. And guess what? That's your world. That's your kingdom. I'm just over here as the catalyst in basically, I don't say enforcing, but feeding, enabling you to become successful. And that was the thought behind the guild, which was different because a lot of companies, no shade, but they're all Navy SEALs, they're all Green Berets, they're all SWAT guys. And so you get this very incestuous mindset. And I said, man, I don't want that. So we started connecting with dudes from Delta Force, from Green Berets, TBTs, full-time SWAT, some guys Northeast, one guy out in Portugal, one guy down in Florida, guys out in California. And what we found is everybody had a different experience, different mentality. And when we designed curriculum, instead of it being like, nope, you shut up, you're doing it my way. No, man, it's a flat company. You give your opinion, and then we started shaping things. And ultimately that created a really cool culture where when we train, we're not just training you one way or one facet. We're giving you an incredibly holistic standpoint because it's wide and broad. There's a lot of people out there that are 3 inches deep and 3 miles wide. I didn't want to be that. So we wanted to dig down deep. And so that's the foundation of where the guild came from. That's why we created it. That's why it's called a guild. I know it's kind of a silly name, but that's the beginning of it.
I don't think it's silly at all. I mean, there's kind of some basic things that you guys do. If you had to kind of break them down into, I don't know, like there's many things that you guys are teaching, right? And you just alluded to that, but if you had to break it down, like what are the things?
Yeah. So for patrol guys, we have some patrol stuff in there, but what we found is people from the academy, I don't want to piss off everybody, but it's a subpar. It's not even 101 breaching. I mean, they get a ram and a Halligan, here you go. And it's just not adequate. So we go to another level to help patrol guys, CID, narcotics, stuff like that. We have a course called SKS. Narcotics, a lot of times does a whole lot more operations than special operations. SWAT teams.
It's interesting you bring that up. I just had a little tangent here. If you just indulge me,
it, man.
I was having a conversation with a guy. I'm not going to use his name, but you'd know who it was. This was a private conversation, and he doesn't want to really be public about it, but this guy dug deep on some stuff. We were talking about things, and I think this is relevant with regard to dynamic entry type warrant service, and kind of some of the statistics that have come out, right, about, and you mentioned like NTOA. I think you mentioned that at the beginning, or maybe you mentioned it off air. We're talking about NTOA has made some statements about like what they think is the right way to do. And again, that's not doctrine in their mind. I think what that is more like, we made a statement. We're not saying everybody has to do this, but this is just what we're saying. Well, people are taking that. You are somehow you got wanded like the grand master of all of this. And so chiefs hear that and city councils hear that and whatever else. Like, well, if NTOA says that, then we need to do it this way. My point in saying that is there's a lot of, he dug into this like deep, and this is going to come up later in another podcast I'm doing with some other guys at some point. My point in this was about the narcotics warrants being served, and let's just say tactical operations and shootings, officer involved shootings, and officers being killed. And the majority of the dynamic entries that have happened in this, this couple of year long statistics that were taken, the majority of them were coming from the narcotics guys that were running these things. And what was interesting about that was they are not being trained as a team. They are not getting team trained to do this. They're not equipped to do this. And a lot of times it's kind of like a conglomeration of guys, like who's available right now to go do this and do the service. And surprise, surprise, guys are getting hurt because it's not going down very well. It's not very organized. So when you said that, it just kind of jogged my memory to think back to that conversation going, well, that's interesting. Made me dig even a little bit deeper into it to kind of do some research behind this, to have a more in-depth conversation about those kinds of policies or doctrines that exist that now we are locked into that are not necessarily, they could be false. Yeah. Right. So going back, sorry, I didn't mean to go too far off the rails.
You can't
there.
Go tell, the Hare Krishnas that the Methodists are wrong, and the Methodists don't want to go tell the Pentecostals are wrong, and they don't want to go tell the Muslims are wrong, and everyone has their religion and their doctrine. And that's essentially what we have in law enforcement. It's just, we call it different things: narcotics, CID, SWAT, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is, man, those guys inherently they're solid cats, and they have a lot of great experience.
Agreed.
But, that's the way we've always done it mentality comes in. But like they'll go through like a 1 or 2 day entry school or whatever. And so it's just like a bunch of herding cats rolling through
Which is the point. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we want to do is take them from probable cause to prosecution. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's everything from, hey, how do we suppress the vehicle? Now, we're not teaching vehicle CQB or whatever you want to call it. We're teaching, how do I keep that vehicle from ever moving? Furthermore, they don't want SWAT to get involved. Why? Because they want to rescue the dope. It's a part of their case. No matter how much we argue, it's still a part of their case. They want that dope, that evidence, that SME, whatever, or SAM stuff going out there. So what if we could teach you how to properly do a port so that you could see in there and you could hold cover? What if we could teach you different ways to, if they flushed evidence, to keep that evidence from being disposed? How could we teach you a way that is maybe not necessarily 100% dynamic, but the way that we control that structure is a very dynamic thing? So we do that. And then obviously our bread and butter is breaching. We've now been accepted as one of the formal schools of breaching out there, and it's exploded to the point, I think we did 6 or 7 courses in April. Most of those are breaching this week in Cali. Next week I'm in Ohio. Stuff going all over. So we do everything from ballistic breaching. We do everything from exothermic. We do everything from bypass methods. We were one of the first schools to do that. Very important. And we could talk about these things. And then we get into the explosive side. That's one of those things a lot of people don't want to touch, from the liability, the insurance, which sure as hell ain't cheap, and all the things that go with that. And then finally, that kind of culminates into our instructor development. And I'll close this out, Scott, by telling you, we have, integrated leadership and leader, we call it, and all these different things. But what's unique about the Guild, and look at other people's programs, I'm not saying they do it wrong, but if you look at our course catalogs from top to bottom, we design that so that if you're a 1 or 2 year patrol guy, the Guild can come in and help you. If you're a 3 or 4 year guy, now you're on SWAT, now you're on narcotics, we've got something for
There's
you.
levels.
Now, so what happens in law enforcement is they get very little training. So we created a program that's a 20-year program.
You can meet them wherever they are.
So it's continual growth to allow them to expand their knowledge. It may not be me teaching it all, or Jabo or Sean or any one instructor, but that's where we have guys that step up and can help them all along the way in their entire career.
Okay, so let's talk about breaching. So first off, circling back to that real quick. So when I first entered into the firearms space, I saw that as being a huge missing gap. And again, I was coming from the civilian perspective, but I was also standing on the firing line with law enforcement officers, both federal and municipal guys, people that had a lot of experience. The guy that was teaching it probably had one of those funny hats with an insignia on it from some branch of the, whatever, it was in his Instagram bio. He did these things or whatever else. So it was pretty dynamic in that sense. And what I recognized was the course that was being taught, there was really nothing behind that or nothing beyond that until that instructor couldn't keep putting the same people back in that class anymore. So then it was like, well, now I got to come up with something new, right? But what did we go through in that first course that set us up for success in the second course? And what did I leave there with in order to improve my skill so that I could move into the second course, right? And have the technical ability, right? The fundamentals, the foundations underneath me that I could continue to learn when I was gone, right? Mm-hmm. What resources were there what resources could be or might be available to me outside of just paying another $400 for the same course again, right? And then the next course was something completely different because that's what they felt like they needed to do. It was, oh, well, I already did the dynamic pistol movement, whatever course. Now I need to do this with rifles and we need to make it a little bit more quote unquote dynamic. So we're going to add this thing. And it ends up being kind of just a conglomeration of stuff.
Repackage.
What's that? Yeah.
We repackage.
You're repackaging it. Yeah. At the same time, what you have there is this huge dynamic of people that are coming into with all different levels of skill or not having skill for that matter, and they're just doing what's convenient for them or what they can afford. Convenient being like, well, I am free this weekend, so I'll just go to this class, which is really should be maybe like more like a level 2 type of class, right? Or course, so they can build on the things that I didn't get, and no accountability to, you probably shouldn't come to this course yet. You should go to this other one. This is important for you and for me.
Deal with it all the time.
Right. So that I can evaluate you and you can evaluate and we can be on the same page so that you are getting what you need when you come to this. You're not, but no, I need your $400. So you just jump in where you can. I got to put butts in the seats. And I feel like that's kind of how law enforcement is too. We're just like, we have seats to fill. I need to put these people through here. There's an administrative task that exists here where I have to check this box to cover myself as to not have a failure to train at some point. And then nothing comes after that for another, 2 years in some cases, right? They go through this training maybe every 2 years. And there's been no follow-up training, any of that. We had to put them through whatever other schools they had to go through and so forth. So, looking at the levels and being able to deliver the product or the service to the person that needs it and where they need it, I think is an extremely huge miss in the law enforcement industry. One of the things that kind of coming in today, I was kind of preparing, I'm like, well, what does it look like right now? I don't even really know in terms of like the statistics, but one of the interesting ones that I looked at was like, what about the privatized or the third party companies that are going in and training these people? Because clearly it's not getting done inside the institution. What are the reasons why? Well, there's probably a multitude there. One is they've had the wrong instructors in those classes for a long time. And so it's just gotten so far behind, it's completely out of line. Yes, funding has something to do with this. Yes, recruitment and retention has something to do with this because like we lost a bunch of people. This is like the most controversial time to be a police officer in probably the history that we've had, or at least as long as I've been alive for the last 51 years or whatever. It's very tough to be a police officer right now. They get a lot of heat. So we had a lot of exits, right? A lot of that institutional knowledge, whether good or bad, we've always done it this way, so we're going to continue to do it this way thing. But regardless, there's some stuff there that disappeared. And so now you have to backfill with all the new people. So the people that maybe need more advanced training so that they can hand that down are not getting that because you have to give all this initial training to all these new people to at least just get them up to speed so that we can tick these boxes, get them out on the streets, right? Get boots on the ground. I think the stat was like FLETC right now is only delivering like 64% of where they're supposed to be in terms of training to federal law enforcement right now. And we see all these problems, quote unquote problems, that are happening out there on the streets with federal law enforcement teams as they're going out there. They're not getting the training that they need. They're not prepared, and we are seeing the results of that. It's going to be up to the third parties to come in and fill that gap, which is why what you're doing and how you're coming at it is so important, because to your point, you have all these agencies that are out there, small, medium, large, extra large, whatever they are. They all have the same problems. Those problems exist everywhere. So if I was going to be in that business, I would want to be able to meet the need where it is at the time that they need it, at the place that they need it, for whatever. And I think what we have are these canned courses. It's like, well, and this is no shade on Ben. I think Ben's awesome. Ben does a really good job, and he's kind of at that point where he works with some very, very high skilled units. Oh, yeah. So he can come in and do some very, very specific things. I guess my point in saying that is there's a gap, and instructors, if all you have is this one thing to deliver, you need to examine that, because that's going to limit you. It's stupid to me that that's all you're doing, and you're not drilling down to go deeper or be better and self-examine, because the opportunity that's there right now is massive. And for the first time in probably a very long, maybe ever, agencies are looking at this going, yeah, we have a problem and we can't solve this problem. We need to bring somebody in from the outside. Who are we going to bring in? And sometimes they make a major mistake. I think you alluded to that a little bit, some other companies and other things. So anyway, circling back to kind of what you're doing on the breaching side, like I see that, like, again, it's a taboo kind of subject in a lot of ways, but how you're integrating all the different things, like, well, we can come in, we can do this, but we can also do this other thing for this other team, right? And having the different levels that you have and the way that it's kind of set up, you don't really have to say no. You could say yes to everybody, no matter where they are. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of a rant there, but I'm just going back to kind of how you structured your business and kind of how you built it. I have guys that have all these different experiences and worked in all these different areas and done all these different things. And we've developed these curriculums to be able to go in and do these different things when the need is, where the need is and when it's needed. I think that's super important. And I think that's a lesson that people should be taking away, because if all you're doing is the same thing year after year after year after year, pretty soon you're going to run out of clients, because somebody else is going to come take the space.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And there's a lot to unpack right there. And I agree with almost everything. One thing is we as a privatized company must evolve. I heard one person, through the grapevine, I would say every 3 to 4 courses, our manual is updated. Always. Now we have version 1, version 2, version 3, version 7. I mean, we're like on version 3.79 or whatever it is.
It takes a lot of work, man.
It does. And the thing is I can be satisfied with it. It was good a year ago, but it wasn't where I wanted it to be. I did a course this week. We just made 7 changes, small changes to the manual. But the thing is here's a question I have for you, Scott. What iPhone do you have?
I don't even know, man. It's like a 13 or something.
Okay, 13. Why don't you have a 1? Why not a 2?
Right.
Why don't you have a rotary phone? Why ain't you using smoke signals? Well, a call is a call is a call. Back in the day when we had the cord rolling through the house, we're talking to our honey in mom and dad's room, shutting it, like, yo, I'm talking and your sister's listening in on you. We don't do that. Why? Because technology evolves, because we evolve. The phone call is still a phone call, but the abilities of the phone increases. Well, the same is true with instructors, especially on the privatized, because there's no lobbyists, there's no mandates they have to come to us. So if we're not evolving, whether we like to admit it or not, you're dying. If your curriculum is not growing, you're dying. And so that's another reason it's so important to have a group around you that's still operational. I'm not operational. Jabo's not operational, but Sean is, Jeremy is, the list goes on and on and on. About 70% of our team is still kicking indoors, doing the job on a daily basis, either military side or whatever. So I think that's super important. Next thing that is going to ruffle some feelings here is I think TOAs, I'm going to get some heat on this one. We might have to edit it out.
Bring it.
I think TOAs are one of the greatest blessings and curses to law enforcement.
Okay, tell me why.
TOAs are amazing in that you get a lot of opportunities for training, but it goes back to what I said earlier. You get a lot of opportunities for 3 inches wide or 3 inches deep and 3 miles wide. And so what they'll do is they'll say, well, I went to a breaching course because I had a 1-day TOA course. No, bro. You
went to an intro.
You just kissed the prom queen on the cheek.
Okay.
There's a way you can go make out with her over here. Okay. But right now you got to get this foundation. And so a lot of people think, well, I got it at this TOA. And so their level of understanding is so shallow. And there's a lot of people say, well, man, I had operational experience in breaching. That's awesome. That's fantastic. You probably have more than me. Fantastic. You probably have more than so-and-so on our team. But do you truly understand the why you're doing this? Do you understand the context behind it? It's like going to a Halligan. You know, so many people, we're talking about just walking in front of a door and doing this one little old maneuver. Do you know how many maneuvers I can use with a Halligan? I can gap with a Halligan. Do you understand 15-to-1 mechanical advantage? Do I understand the difference in a 30-inch and a 24-inch? Do I understand the difference in a Kelly tool? Do I understand the difference where I use the adze? Do I use the pike? Do I understand how to carry it, how to deploy it, how to attack an inward and outward? Most have no idea that's a Halligan. Something as simple as a Halligan can manipulate almost every door out there, but we learn 1 or 2 facets. You say, why is that important? Because that is a contextual piece of information that allows me then to make a decision that is educated to defeat the target that I don't yet know that I'm going to have to defeat. And if all you know is 1 or 2 ways, then you become a cookie cutter breacher, cookie cutter shooter. And that's a problem. So that's why when we try to teach it, we're always evolving, we're always growing, we're always trying to find ways to challenge the students with relevancy. Your experience matters, but if your experience is rooted and grounded in 1980s and 90s, it may not really be the experience you thought it was. So that's why we have this balance of yin and yang, you know, that I think is so important. And now I'm ranting, but
well, no, you're not ranting at all. I think this will come back. Yeah, but Shane, what we do works.
Yeah.
I mean,
for now.
So that's always kind of what I say until it doesn't. Right.
Yeah.
And then where do you go? Let's go tangent here for a second. Let's talk to me and help me understand the different types of breaching. I mean, from mechanical to exothermic again, I do not want to go into a deep dive here. You just blow up my brain and probably people listening too, because I already know you could do that, right? So if you can, maybe at a high level, just go through the different types and kind of what that would look like. Yeah, because I know people are breaching doors, but they're not all the same thing.
No, they're not. So a high level overview is, we don't even call it mechanical because that is, words mean things. And we should say the contextual right word. So we say manual breaching, manual labor. There's a whole spill behind that. You have ballistic, which is a shotgun breaching. Okay. That's something that a lot of people frown on because they don't understand the why behind it. You've got exothermic, which is with a torch, typically things burning at 5,000 to 7,000 degrees. There's a bunch of different stuff out there for that. Then you get into hydraulic, which is the new thing. And there's some amazing technology. We run Rapid Assault, we run Hurst, we run Hamatro, all great tools out there. They all do different things, some better than others. Then you get into bypass. That's one that's not known.
Talk to me about that. You mentioned that before. I don't know what that is.
So bypass to us is just simply, I'm not doing surreptitious, ninja stuff, lock picking. Lock picking takes time. It's a little slower of a process. It's definitely a needed skill. That's not our wheelhouse, so we stay away from it. There's some good dudes out there. Bypass is kind of a hasty way that I can just simply get past a lock by not using destructive means. Mammal's house, get a welfare concern. I could take the ram. I could take my $20,000 hydraulic tool and beat the hell out of Mammal's door, or I can just simply do a Zac tool and rake the lock, and Mammal can be happy. Or if I'm a school resource officer and I've got a Uvalde situation, maybe I'm trying to get up to where shots are fired. I'm trying to be as quiet and fast as I can without being exposed, something like that. Well, I can take a DDT, which is a double door tool, go in between the locks, turn it, twist it, pop the lock, and walk right in there. And it's just as fast as everything else without compromising myself. Okay. So bypass is simply not surreptitious, not destructive. It's just a way to bypass the locking mechanism. There's a bunch of different ways.
Okay.
And then you have the big one that I love so much, and all of them, for that matter. But you got power tools, which is chainsaws, quickie saws, big discrepancies between gas and battery powered. That's a whole thing. And then we get into the energetic, most people say explosive breaching. Again, you got to be careful with that because we may have to testify on that.
Gotcha.
And we call it energetic access for a reason.
Okay.
And that is using all types of stuff. And we don't subscribe to P for plenty. It's P for precision in what we do at law enforcement.
P for what?
Plenty.
Oh, got you.
We're not doing many nukes. Unfortunately, I can't. Yeah, I can't take out the bad guy with the door at the same time typically. So,
which might be a little different than how the military runs it. Yeah.
It is. It's a lot different. And so that's your main forms of breaching. I think I pretty much covered them all. And then you have your what we call exigent breaching, which is, hey, I don't have all these tools. How do I take a chain? I got a car and I got to get that door off. Mm-hmm. And then, or how do I go to Lowe's or Home Depot and grab this right here? I only got $100 budget. What do I do, boss? Well, here's some options for you.
Gotcha.
But that's kind of the snapshot of what breaching is. But ultimately it is this. It is complex problem solving to gain access to a structure by the skill set and the means that you've acquired. And that can be in a lot of different ways.
Okay. So let's break this down a little bit just in putting it into application. Mm-hmm. What is, or what are some of the biggest mistakes, technical mistakes that you see people making when they think they're ready to breach and then they actually go about the process?
We talking about all breaching or?
Yeah, maybe that's too broad a question. Yeah, let's just start high level there. And let me back up. Just like, what are some of the bigger technical mistakes that they may be making prior to, not at the point of, but prior to? What could they be doing better?
Yeah, well, just the lack of truly of training the right way.
Okay.
So a lot of it comes down to, they train and they're like, oh man, I got all this experience training. Well, yeah, but if you're reinforcing the wrong thing over and over and over, mm-hmm. you really don't have the right experiences. You just got a lot of reps. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference. For instance, the RAM. We see a ton of people on a tactical RAM, whether it's 25 to 35, 40 pound RAM, single man RAM, where, they're doing these old antiquated technology or swings. You got the old FBI swing. They're getting in nice and tight. And then you got the old, what we call the pendulum swing, where they're mm-hmm. coming up high right here. We do that because that's the way my sergeant taught him.
It's institution education, man.
Yeah. But then they're coming to our school and they're like, yeah, man, I broke this finger. I broke this hand right here.
Weird.
I blew out my, rotator cuff. All of these injuries happen. And what did I do wrong? Your mechanics were wrong. Your biomechanics were wrong. You didn't understand your physiology. So therefore there's a lot of things. And I go into a big, long excerpt of this, but if I've got a door right here, Scott, and I go to breach this door and now I over penetrate the door, which means I've thrown my body inside. I've slowed down the efficiency of the team. I've also compromised myself potentially to get shot. I do not have any way to fight that guy because I'm now bladed off to him. I've lost my spatial awareness. So if we could take these two techniques, blend them together, create a hybrid, which is what I did many, many years ago, 12, 13 years ago, and we teach it all over the country, where we take the best of all of those, make some small tweaks. And here's one for you: breach like an athlete. That's an idea. Then maybe we can be more effective. Now I can get in the fight. Now I've got spatial awareness. Now I can move. Now I know where to go. And it just brings things together. And that's that thing called logic that sometimes we dismiss.
You mentioned a couple of things there, which sounded very familiar to me to conversations that I've had on the combative side, or like the defensive tactics side. Like there's techniques, right? And everybody seems to have the right one, and it just gets taught over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I guess if you looked at them in their constituent parts, okay, those could work, but what happens when it doesn't? Going back, it works till it doesn't, and then what do I fall back to?
Yeah.
And if we take a blend of these things, right, and we take a look at it and then we test it, and the common term is pressure test it, whatever that means, right, in whatever environment we're talking about or for whatever thing, you learn really fast what's better and what isn't. But you have to do those things going back to reps, because if we're just repping the same thing over and over again, we're expecting it to work. When it doesn't, we don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Right. And then what's going on? Talk to me a little bit about how, like, the legal environment around all of this fits into how you teach this stuff.
Yeah. And for the listeners, you and I didn't script any of this. I want them to understand.
Dude, I'm an idiot when it comes to this. Like literally, I know nothing. That's why I'm asking you these questions.
And I love this. And this is one of the reasons, as I told my friend on another podcast, like I hate podcasts, but I like the intellectual questions that we bring out, because that question is truly $1 million question. So it doesn't matter how you've learned to breach, or how you've learned to build a charge, or how you've learned to do A, B, and C. And this goes to tactics, to shooting, to whatever. If it does not fall in the scope of law, policy, and ethical considerations. I love, half of our team are former SOF dudes. Mm-hmm. Half of them. Almost all of our team are veterans. Almost all of them. And I will tell you right now, as much as I love and I have so much immense respect for those guys, that there are some things that are apples and there are some things that are oranges. They're both fruit, they're both sweet, but they are not the same thing. And if it doesn't fall within law, policy, and ethics, doesn't matter what you teach, it doesn't help. So we have to decipher that. So legally speaking, there's so many aspects. A lot of people, if you go to their courses, and I'll put money on this one, I'll put a solid $100 bill. Your listeners can call me out if I'm telling them. They'll put on their objectives legal considerations or law, policy, and ethics, but when they actually teach it,
it's never talked about.
Well, guys, we're good on this one right here. Let's just keep on going. Jim Bob says. I'm like, dude.
To me, that needs to be done in every firearms course and every defensive tactics course. All that should be part of the course in real time. And it
has to be broken down, not just here is the case law, but how does that case law truly apply? You know, when you get into, I mean, we can talk about Hackham versus Safari Land. We can get into Springs versus Brown. And there's all these different case laws concerning breaching. Thank God, not that many. That's good. But there are some out there. And how do we learn from these different things and ultimately shore up and prevent ourselves from falling into the same legal traps? $3 billion has been paid out in the last 10 years, I think it is, on, civil lawsuits. And a lot of it comes down to how we interacted with that door, that structure, and our techniques. So I think it is a big, important thing. And I think we should really break down the law side of everything. The law, policy, and ethical side is not a constraint as long as you understand it. It's only scary to people that don't understand how to work inside of it. And when people that just hear about law and they don't actually study law and they don't actually teach it, that's a problem. It's just like when you go to a certain school and they ask, well, where'd you learn that? And their background is not in law enforcement, or they've never testified, or they've never been through a deposition, or they've never stood before a grand jury. And then they're going to ask the question, well, what was their authority? I don't know. Let me call them. That can become a problem, because ultimately it's not just what we know, it's where do we learn what we know? Because we have to be accountable to that as well.
Yeah, there's so many things here, because once it goes down, it's already happened, or it's in the process of happening, and it's not something you want to be thinking about at that point. Mm-hmm. You want to have already thought about that, and then you're likely going to have to recall this information, right? Because there's going to be an investigation. There's going to be some type of investigation there. You're going to have to recall this stuff. That will lead into Pryme Infill, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. Mm-hmm. But okay, so thank you for answering that way. And I think that's the only way you can answer it. And that's going to be dependent on the department that you're working for, the agency that you're working for, the jurisdiction that you're working in. It's all very different. You have to know that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I wonder how do you do that? Like what types of, what does that mean for you from a liability perspective as a company? And I don't necessarily mean like legal liability. Mm-hmm. I just mean from like
the teaching side,
teaching side of things. Yeah. How do you guys navigate all that?
Yeah. And it's a lot of work. I'll just tell you, it's work. Here's a great contextual answer. Would you agree the weather is slightly different in Maine than it is here?
Absolutely.
And you would probably agree that down in South Florida, it's even different than here.
Yep.
And the targets are different down in South Florida versus Maine. For instance, if I want to breach a house, just to go nerd for a minute, and I want to do, say, a Griffin frame, and I want to do C1 by 1 inch of data sheet, I put it on there, and I want to blow through the side of that house, and it's just a single layer brick, that works fine down in Mississippi and Tennessee. If I use that same charge and I go out to Utah or up to Maine, that's a fail breach. Why? Because that's a 2x6, maybe with spray and insulation. and we know the enemy of energetics is distance. So what I'm saying is I have to know my target. I have to know my area of operation. Well, the same is true when you teach. I had an embarrassing moment here just right up the road. I was talking about, lawful versus awful. And we were going through all the different case laws that we've seen throughout the country. And we started mentioning one particular case law, and the guys in the back, California Highway Patrol, was like, that doesn't apply here. And I said, what? I said, yeah, that doesn't apply here. And I was like, holy shit, man. And so I said, hey, let's take a time out. So we took a time out. I went out back. I said, educate me. Now I could have been like, I said, no, tell me what and they said, no, based off of this law, and I have to get back with you exactly what the context was. I was like, wow. So we put that in our manual. We have a note and a clause in there for teaching California. And what I'm saying is, just like I have to teach breaching different in Florida than Cali than Maine, you have to teach different. No good instructor teaches the same way everywhere you go. It's like training dogs. I used to train dogs. I was a novice at it, but you can't go to, Good Pet Supply down the road and say, I'm going to get a really, really trained up dog here, because they know one way, just like when you shoot, just like you do fitness. My body, I would dare say, probably might respond differently than your body. You're built like a brick house. I'm built like a slightly fit green bean,
We're not selling yourself too short, man.
But with that being said, I think that when we go places, we have to, as instructors, we have to be accountable to them as the students are accountable to us. And how do we do that? We learn their area of operation. We learn their law. We learn their policy. We can't know it all. We can't know every TTP and SOP out there, but we should at least be familiar. And that's something we take extremely serious. And that's a lot of work, going back to my original comment. And if you're not willing to do that, chances are you're not in it for the right reason, because at that point, you're just trying to get a paycheck. And that's not what our mission is.
So it wouldn't be Iron Size Pocket if I didn't talk a little bit about fitness, right? Because that's kind of the other side of the house that we deal with. So I want to talk about fitness as it relates to breaching. And again, we're staying on that topic. I want to stay on that topic. So I asked a question about technical issues. What are some of the bigger mistakes? I wonder, and maybe for the people that are, into fitness or into working out and keeping themselves healthy and ready for kind of anything, that comes up, that maybe aren't law enforcement, and maybe those that are law enforcement that don't maybe understand this position on a team. Let's talk about the physical fitness or the physical aspect of doing these different things. And when I say fitness, when I think of that, I think of mental fitness, emotional fitness, and physical fitness, because there are some costs here. There's some preparation that needs to be done, I think, in order to be able to do this job well and do it repeatedly, in order to maintain those three components: mental, psychological, emotional, and then also your physical, the physical side. This job can take a toll depending on what you're doing. We're talking about heavy equipment. We're talking about explosives.
TBI.
We're talking about TBI. There's a lot of stuff that comes up in here, and there's I have close friends that I don't know if you hear too good anymore, but I imagine there's some issues there.
Yeah, the right ear is completely legally
done.
deaf.
There's a cost to doing this. So maybe just give some people some perspective on like how this plays into that particular position or job skill set that you may be doing on an occasional or a way more frequent basis.
So talk about the physical part first. You probably have to keep me on track if I get off on the other two.
All right.
That's that TBI thing. So physical fitness, I tell people every course, if you come to a breaching course with the Guild, we always talk about what a competent breacher should or should not be. And one of the top ones is physical fitness. Now, I do think that there are certain standards based off of what a breacher is doing versus what assaulter is doing. That's a bad word in law enforcement, the movement team versus a sniper and stuff like that. But there always must be a high level of physical fitness. If they call you from a special operations standpoint to come in, and even a patrolman, I don't care if it's patrol, I don't care if it's narcotics, whoever it is, and you have a 35-pound ram and you can't carry that 2 city blocks at a sprint speed, you're wrong. You're not the right guy or the right girl for the job. If you have to hit the door 10 times. And we've seen all those videos. We can break them down. If you have to hit the door 10 times and yet I can have Scott hit the door 1 time, you say, well, what's the big deal? They still got in.
It's efficiency and economy of movement, man.
That's it. 1 second. We'll just say 1 second per swing. That's fast. 1 second per swing. Scott, based off your shooting performance, how many rounds can you get off in 10 seconds? You're 2-3 mags
Right.
at this point. Now equate that to lives, equate that to kids, equate that to some innocent personnel on the outside. That's cops that's getting kids are killed. That's kids that's getting killed. That's the list goes on and on and on. So time is of the essence. The next thing is, if you are so concerned with your physical fitness and breathing and those kind of things that now you cannot process the problem,
that becomes a limiter for you.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
You're more focused on your breathing. You're more focused on, Fatty McGee from way back in the day, and you're not focused on the job at hand. I think it was Matt Prank. I want to give him credit. I'm pretty sure it was, but he said, I can't make people process any faster, but what we can do is we can eliminate all of those barriers to allow you to focus on the simple things so that you can then, in fact, really process faster because you're not concerned. Well, that's what we want to do with breaching. We want to kiss-mip, right? Keep it simple, make it plain. How we swing a ram, how we carry a Halligan, how we place the tool. But then the level of fitness must I can't get it out, must match that, because if it doesn't, then now you're just so caught up in just all of what I can't do physically. And then on the emotional side, I think this is a big part of it too, is I liken it to this. Who's the most important person on the team? Well, snipers will say snipers, assaulters will say assaulters, and everyone has their little place. Well, everyone's equally as important based off the timing of the operation. If I'm moving up to the house, it could be the containment element, maybe canine, maybe helo assets. Once I come to the door or to the window, it might be the breaching element. And then, of course, you got the assault element that goes in there that becomes the most important. So emotionally, you have to realize what your job is, not to do any more, not to do any less. And you must be a team player, because a breacher is kind of like the glue. You're the guts inside of the frame. You don't have all the glory in the world, but by God, when it's your time to shine, it's sure as hell your time to shine. And then there was one more you said, and I had a thought.
No, I was thinking about psychologically, but we're still talking about physical. We're just talking about your brain, right? Yeah. And maintaining that with things like TBI. And I think the emotional, psychological piece kind of ties into what you said there. Maybe I should have stated that differently. I just think about the physical fitness of your brain and staying sharp and protected, and taking precautions and checking in and those kind of things. I mean, I have no idea about this. I do know about TBI. I do know the impacts of blasts if we're using that, right? Like, so if you're doing the energetic breaching, that's the right term, right? All right. I'll never say explosive breaching again, except for what I just said right there. But like energetic breaching, if you're doing this, like, there's a toll. I mean, my only experience with that actually was with the aforementioned Chris Curris. I was at TTPOA last year, and he was doing some CQB stuff with one of his buddies, and the next door, one of the other groups was doing some energetic breaching on some doors outside. And we were 50 yards away, and every time one of those things went off, man, like, it was loud, right? There was concussive forces coming even through our building. We were in a brick building, so it was making its way through there. I just think about that, and I think about, how many times what do you have to do, like, to prepare yourself for this? What can you do, and what can you do to recover? Are there answers to this?
Yeah, there are. And that's, first of all, I want to give a shout out to a company that's doing some great work out there, ROE Labs. If you go check them out, a couple Green Berets.
I caught that. I caught a post that I think they tagged you in, or that you guys were collaborating on. And I have been following them. Yeah. Some of the stuff they're doing.
There are huge advancements, and we can go down this rabbit hole as long as you want.
I think it's probably another conversation, but please go there.
I'll give you the short version is, back in the day, suck it up, buttercup.
Right.
That was the answer. I remember in training one time going in and eating a 2-strander, which is 50 grains per linear foot. So that's 100 grains per linear foot on a concrete floor, railroad ties, going in, charge going off, me going in there, working this problem, and I get done and my nose is just dripping. Sinus is released and all this stuff. You go back, you're concussed. You're like, man, what I got a terrible headache for? But you didn't know any better because the advancements were not there even 15 years ago. We were using, if you really want to go nerdy, we were still using like the Hopkins Cran scale, and we were still using the old Weibull equation. That's not even what we're using anymore. We're using new equations. We're using computational fluid dynamics. Here's one, bro. We're even using AI to cross-reference things. This week when we do the course, there's a company called Neurable, also working with MedEng. We've been working with them. They're taking headsets like I have right here and you have, and they're putting computer chips in them, and they're tracking our exposures using AI then to cross-reference our brain waves. That's stuff we haven't even had till the last few years. So to answer your question, there's great technology. Team Wendy's involved in the Panther Project, a bunch of neat stuff. But what you eat before and after operations and training. And remember, training is the main issue. Operations, we're doing 2 or 3. If we were in Afghanistan, different situation, right. Apples and oranges. But for law enforcement, it's very common. We may go do 5, 10, 15, 20 training breaches in a single day. Creatine, we're finding that's Mississippi coming out. Creatine for everybody else.
Right.
But creatine, D3, making sure the right vitamins, making sure that your brain is properly hydrated, using the right minimum safe distance calculations, not the old school K factor of 18 that's still being used because guys did it years ago and
they're still doing it.
That's the way we've always done it. So there's so many new advancements out there to at least help us. Now we're able to even kind of predict preliminary, possible CTE issues where before you got to be a cadaver to figure that stuff out. So I think we're in a different era now where we just now have to listen to the data. We have to listen to the technology. And if we do that, we can probably mitigate a lot of things. Simple stuff like putting a wool blanket inside of a shoot house. If it's like cinder block, we're finding out that is helping reduce blast pressure exposure. And like I said, we can go down rabbit holes with this stuff, but I think vitamins, I think sleep, using the ACE test, which is a test you can use in the field to determine if you were concussed, limiting your exposures to PSI once daily. Never did that before. Before it was like, well, 2 PSI. Yeah, well, 18 times now we have cumulative issues that we got going on here.
36, yeah.
Yeah. Understand duration. And here's one, since you're a gun guy, a Barrett 50 cal, right? If you take a Barrett 50 cal open air environment, you lay down and you shoot it with your standard break on there. The body, according to most data, 4.0 PSI is the maximum threshold that we should be exposed to. 4.0 PSI. Well, the Barrett goes off and we're getting spikes anywhere from like 8 to 11. But here's what they don't understand. That I just had an email on this. The guy's like, well, man, you're getting spikes up here. I said, yes, but you got to understand the difference in the spike and the duration. It's not just how high it is, it's how long you've been exposed to. So understanding the difference in incident pressure to positive, to negative, to dynamic, to how all of these things come together, how a 3-dimensional environment. I ask students, how many reflective points do you have in this room? And I usually get like 8. I'm like, bro, that camera, that corner, that bottle, that wall. So how do you detect it? Well, you can't. So what do? Get your ass out of the room. And so we have certain things that help us to understand that. So I know that's a long answer. It's something I'm very, very passionate about it, but there are ways we can mitigate it. We can reduce it. We can be smarter about it. And in into Pryme, we should track it so we have analytics to know our exposures to.
Yeah, so let's get into Pryme, but I just wondered the last question on that, and that is that getting taught in that 4-hour TOA course that these guys are
I'm going to bet no. Okay. I'm going to bet no.
All right, let's move into Pryme. And a little bit of this comes from, in my mind, like a litigation crisis, right? There's also, with regard to like everything goes to court now, everything's being investigated, everybody's under pressure. How does that impact policies and how, what equipment we're using, what we can use, how much training we get versus how much training we don't get, how much technology we get versus what we don't. I'm sure there's this vast swath of things that agencies have to go through, when these things are being done on any operation for that matter, but certainly one where we're having to breach a door in some way or another. So I look at it in a couple different ways. I look at it in like operational, like effectiveness, right? And we're talking about Pryme now. So for those people that might have missed that, Pryme Infill, which is the other company that now you are the director of training for, correct?
Yep. Development training.
And that just started this year.
January.
So that's new. That's new for you. Yeah. And is the company new?
Company actually got its start around 21. Ironically enough, me and a bunch of all companies seemed like we started in 21. There was something that happened. I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was a pandemic. And so, yeah, there's a lot of companies that started in that 21, 22 era. So they were like us, kind of founded in 21 and then 22 got going.
Okay. So you're coming on with them in Pryme Infill, but the guys you've known and worked around with for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have this, there's a lot of pieces to this, right? With Pryme Infill. So I want to walk through it, but I look at it in a couple different ways, like operational effectiveness, like organization, communication, again, crisis or litigation and like planning, right? What's happening in real time, some level of like a veil of secrecy within that. Let's just call it like geofencing on top of geolocations and things like that. So those are kind of all the things that are involved with Pryme Infill. So maybe that's kind of my understanding of all the different components.
Yeah, you're pretty close.
I probably missed a few, but maybe you can talk about Pryme and what's going on there.
Well, I think for people that are non-law enforcement, let me speak to them for a minute. You know, one thing is you got to understand the complications that it is to be a cop today. It's not the same as 10 years ago when I was a cop. It's not the same as it was 20 years ago. That's sure as hell the truth. The cops of today deal with more scrutiny. They deal with more criticism. And by God, every single thing is on camera. See the dude the other day that was on an operation, I think it was here, or
scrolling through Tinder or something.
I'm like, oh my God, here we go.
Yep.
And
so in the Central Valley.
And that stuff is a part of what we have to deal with now. You know, so quite honestly, I think there's a level of professionalism in law enforcement now, as much hate as they get, that's higher than it's ever been. I think there's more fit, more capable cops now than maybe there's ever been. And that may not be agreed upon, but after a dude that's trained thousands of dudes, I'm seeing it. There is a culture shift because it's demanded of them. And that, go ahead, but that is what leads me into why Pryme was created.
Well, no, I was just going to add, like, so that's been my experience in the last couple of years versus my first couple of years and really getting into the law enforcement environment specific to the younger officers coming in. They are very aware. They're much more aware of their fitness and their health, right? And what I mean by that is, like, they know a lot more than some of the older officers. I'm not saying they're in better shape or better physical condition, but in a lot of cases they are. And because they have taken the time to study it a little bit, there's more access to information. They haven't been indoctrinated into, I just got to be huge or anything like that. They're looking at things like recovery, like nutrition, like sleep. Like, they understand that these things are important and they're already implementing those into their lives earlier in their career, or at least they're trying, you know, with the night shifts and the overtime and things like that. But they are aware, and so they are adopting fitness programs. They're trying to do something. And that's not stuff that's necessarily being offered to them by their agency. Right. So what I'm saying is they're being more proactive. So to hear you say that and kind of confirm that for me, like, it's tough for me to say because the officer, there's a lot of talk around out of shape, unfit, untrained officers.
Sure.
Right. Again, it gets a lot of attention. And I've had those conversations with people. What should the standard be? Man, that depends. Right. And we're never going to agree on exactly what it should be. But when it comes down to the basics and basic fundamentals, like, being in shape is important. Right. And what does that mean? And how do we account for that? So again, that's just a little tangent I don't want to go on. But going back to Pryme and the scrutiny that you were saying that officers are under and the things that they have available to them to avoid that, or I think just to have more knowledge about how to work through the scrutiny is super important. So, and more of them need to get that. And like with the technology that exists there, my perception is it's so new in a lot of cases. It was only offered to very, very like high-end specialized units, like at our highest level of military. And now it's starting to trickle down.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I think that is one of the very, very positive things for the military specifically. I'll give SOF a lot of credit here. You know, they have been taking care of themselves over the last 10, 15 years better than they ever have. Everything from yoga, from meditation to health, to benefits, to stretching. Even when I was overseas, I had access to anything I wanted as far as like for my mental health and anything else. We go out and do an operation. If we took indirect fire, we could go talk. I mean, tons of things that were now at our access. And that's now trickled down from the soft world into the LE. And that's a very, very positive thing. So back to Pryme. So Jared in 2020, here locally, I won't say the agency, I don't know if I'm supposed to, but here locally during the whole entire Floyd riots across the country, they had an emergency operation. He goes out, situation happened. They basically got sued. DOJ got involved. Others got involved, and he got involved in a deposition, him and others. It wasn't just him. And what he figured out is, as they were scrutinizing him, especially if a civil deposition, if you've ever been through anything or heard of that, I mean, they want to know exactly the amount of keratin in your toenails.
I actually had a very in-depth conversation with an attorney who represents police officers, in their time of need, which is after all of it's happened, and they were never told any of this stuff before and how to handle it going in, and they're learning it now when their life, career, finance, houses, are on the line. So
yeah, I did a lot of testimony, and I have a good friend of mine through the years, the Pharisas. They're super well known, and we had battles in court, and I was amazed at where that guy, even though he was my friend, I was amazed at how he could basically just destroy a cop that was not prepared. So Jared went through that, and he said, I never want this to happen again. It probably created embarrassment, probably created a bunch of, stressful years for his family, his wife, and everything else. So he went on and went into PowerPoint and said, I'm going to put something together that will help me if this ever happens. I want to make sure that I have mission planning covered. I want to make sure that I have, everything from training documentation, all of these things. And through the course of time of him being a law enforcement officer here in the state of California, it exploded into, this could actually be an app. Well, he had enough foresight and mentality to connect with the right people. And now this thing has absolutely taken over. And what it is, in a nutshell, in the military, we call it Blue Force Tracker, which is ATAC. And there's also other companies that are kind of competitors, so I won't throw their names out there. But they do a lot of stuff. They just only do a few things. Jared, just like the Guild, which is one reason we really kumbaya'd together so well many years ago now, is because that we wanted to look at this from a very broad perspective. So he said, hey, why don't we put a notification system in there? So now there's a notification system that I can override your silence. I can override your do not disturb. I can actually give you feedback. Hey, you know what? Scott can't make it right now. Cool. He's out with his family on his anniversary. Automatically populates. So now the commander's not wondering, where's Scott? What's going on? Then he said, hey, it would be awesome too if we put an app in there. Why? Because Wire's not sanctioned. What's another? WeChat's not sanctioned. Signal sure as hell not sanctioned. All of these apps are not sanctioned. So we said, what if we could create a sanctioned app? Why? So instead of you having to give over your phone, now they can file for discovery, but they do it through the AWS Gov Cloud. Everything's right there. That's a cool idea. Hey, you know what? That Blue Force Tracker ATAC thing is pretty cool. We should probably have geospatial awareness. So now we can link into Starlink or AT&T or whatever system we have, create a map, create an overlay, create this geofence. And if you've ever been a cop or row with them, one of the most annoying things in the world, Scott, is B-52 on the scene.
Yeah.
B-27 on scene, 1947. I'm like,
radio traffic.
Shut up.
Yep.
Well, the moment you get on there, boom, pops up. Now we know where you are. Well, then the problem came in because real cops are designing this. Well, it burns your battery up. So we created the program that, in other words, it won't move until you start moving. So we're not burning your battery up. Then we put in BAMSys.
So when you're sitting on a house for 6 hours,
you're cool.
Yeah.
Then all the mission planning, all of that is a part of it. Legal protection from Katie and other people who are big time attorneys that went in there and said, hey, let me go ahead and create narratives for you. And you just plug and play all this. And then just to kind of close this out, he did all these different components and said, hey, we also need training. And so then there's a whole training documentation because the courts don't really care how awesome you are. They want to know where you screw up. So now we can document the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that we need. And then when it's said and done, I can hit one button, create a PDF, create a PowerPoint presentation. And then he put a bunch of dudes, I'm not saying I'm one of them, but a bunch of really awesome human beings on the team that were all former law enforcement. And now there's breaching sections, canine section, medical section. It is such an intensive, in-depth program. There is truly, when I say there's nothing like it, there's nothing like it. It's mind-blowing. And I work for him. And I text him all the time. You can look at my text. I'm like, dude, this program is amazing. How much stress and money it would have saved agencies with all the overtime is mind-boggling.
You said, I think the number you said was like $3 billion in
10 years, at least $3 billion in 10 years we paid out.
I think that I think what I looked at was the average like law enforcement basic training and additional trainings that happen. This is just like the training budgets. This isn't like for, I could be wrong about this. Actually, let me see if I can pull it up here. It was, let's see. Yeah, U.S. law enforcement training from 2025 to 2026 was a $4.1 billion investment, right? It's projected to grow at like 4.7% over like the next 7 years. You just said they spent $3 billion fighting these cases or in payouts, basically, in litigation. That's just in the payout. That's not what it costs to fight the payout, right? That's got to be equal or more.
Oh, yeah. And that doesn't even...
I mean, I've had attorneys before, and it cost me $300 to send a freaking email.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely. Well, and then we wonder, too, why are cops living an average of 5 years after? Well, my God, if you're this stressed out all the time about all this stuff, and then agencies are like, man, we can't afford this. And my rebuttal is always, man, you can't afford not to.
Yeah.
Especially when you see what it costs. We're not to get into that, but I'm just saying it was designed. It's kind of like the BRB, throw a little love to our boy, Chris.
Yep.
Chris didn't design that to make a bunch of money. He designed that to fill a need.
Yep.
Jared didn't create this program, and as a co-founder, others didn't create this program because they wanted to make money. They did it to fill a need. And by proxy, it ended up helping both of those guys. So it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. So thanks for running me through that. I feel like I may have met Jared. I'll check in with you off air. I think I actually may have met him once.
Yeah, you and him are about the same stature. He's a little more clean shaven.
So that actually maybe confirms my suspicion. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
At the time, it was very new. It was about a year ago. We can talk about that offline. Thank you for running me through that, because again, going back to some of the other conversations I had an opportunity to go to a conference this last year here in California, and it was like a use of force conference, and most of the talking was about legal, right? And what got us into this situation, right? And how do we do a better job at handling situations, because use of force is going to happen. But the fact of the matter is with, like, particularly here in California, policies and laws have been put in place that put officers' personal liability at risk now. And it happened very fast, and it wasn't communicated well. And as a result, it's created all kinds of problems. And unfortunately, they weren't really given the tools to understand, not proper training, right? Not proper education. And again, going back, you used there's a lot of acronyms today, by the way, but you used
I'll tone those down.
You used an acronym about, on the legal side, I think it was, in terms of when I asked you about the different policies in different places in the country, about like it has to fit this criteria. And if it doesn't, then we're not doing it, kind of thing. And I think that's a missing piece. And what I had kind of interjected, I think, was like that type of education and training needs to be happening in real time during the training for the thing that you're doing, whether that's, DT or firearms training or, breaching or whatever it is. We should be talking about these things and layering it in versus like, this is a whole other death by PowerPoint thing that you have to do online for 2 hours.
On that note, that's the whole relationship between the Guild and Pryme. We don't sell it. The Guild sells T-shirts and hats. Outside of that, we sell a service. That's right. It. And Jared came to me and said, "Hey man, would you guys be interested?" I think I reached out to him first, and then he came back to me and said, "Would you be interested?" And I seen it, and I was like, from a company's owner standpoint, I was like, man, we should probably be documenting what we're teaching too at every agency. So we incorporated that in. We just did a course last week in Rainbow City, Alabama, and a part of their FTX, a part of their assessment, their measurement, was each team had to go in and put what they had learned. They print it off. That goes to their chief. That goes to their documents. Now they know exactly what they've learned. This week, all of our breaching reports, we have what we call a PDF builder in there. They'll take those breaching reports. We'll upload every single one of them. They'll get good God, probably a 55 full comprehensive training report that not only gives them all their breach reports, but that is legal testimony, documentation that will help them and support their case.
Yeah. The answer, like, based on my training and experience, what does that mean? Yeah. What was that?
Here's your facts, here. Jack.
It's right here in Discovery.
Yeah.
Like it's all right there. Mm-hmm. Like it's all documented. This is the time. This is how many hours I spent. This is how many reps I got. This is what we did. Exactly what we did based on this. This is who did it.
Right.
All those kind of things. I didn't realize that was such a problem until, again, I had some of these more in-depth conversations, and it actually blew my mind. So this technology, which is interesting, it's just a conglomeration of all these different things that exist out there. And now in today's world with AI, how efficient it can be. I don't know why every agency wouldn't want this.
Yeah.
Again, from a cost savings perspective, going back to like, you can't afford not to have this. And I didn't realize, I mean, I saw it kind of pop up and I saw the connection, but I didn't understand the technology until I started kind of dig into it, like what that means. And so the question I would have about that is like, how does this impact the patrol officer? Like, does it, or is this just more for your units?
No, it's legitimately designed for every aspect of law enforcement. The other part I didn't mention, it's like an RMS CAD system. So we can also tie in dispatch notes if we want to. Mm-hmm. We can tie in drones. We can tie in K9. We can actually, if we had a helo asset, we could do the URL for that helo asset, direct it directly in.
See what's going on.
See what's going in.
Or is even this just wearing this on a placard, like on the front of your...
Yeah, you can. Or you can put it on that computer. You can put it on your phone, or you can Android, Apple, doesn't matter, fully compatible with everything we got going on. So I don't want to let too much out of the bag. I got to reel myself. I get very passionate about it because I love it. But there's now even people outside of law enforcement, which I won't say the particular group, but they're like, we would love to have this. There are security personnel.
This makes sense to me.
Yeah. We would love to have this. So now we're like, okay, well, we better figure out how this thing is all going to happen. And so it's just expanded. It's blown up. And I love, again, not to sing too much praise to Jared. I'll give him some hell later on to humble him back down, but he runs the whole thing like a SWAT team. You know, we're all brothers in arms. We all work together. Everyone has their roles, responsibilities. You know, I go fish with a net. We send it off to Carrie and the boys, and they clean the fish. We put it in there, and everyone kind of works together. But probably the thing I'm most proud about, and I can leave it on this one, is, you know how it is, customer service. Mm-hmm. If there's one thing we try to do really well at the Guild, and that is great customer service. And if there's one company that does better than us, it's Pryme, who I also work for. If it's 3:00 in the morning and the dude's like, I can't get in because of A, B, and C, they don't get, thank you for calling Pyme Infill. Please leave a message. We'll be back to you. Never, because we suck, you know? Nope. It's like, yo, dude, what's up? We treat it like a call out, just like a SWAT team. So somebody's answering the phone. Somebody's helping you out. We actually ran the entire Super Bowl operation behind the scenes. That was all Pryme software.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of others out there that we can't mention that are running it. But I'm really proud of it. And I would have never left a great organization like Team Wendy, which is phenomenal, great company, if I didn't see the value and the potential and what Pryme has to offer. So shameless plug, but man, if just at least hit us up, get a demo on it, and then see for yourself.
I'm glad I asked the question, and you know, it's not a shameless plug. I mean, that's what I really wanted to talk to you about. You know, it's just kind of all the things, again, going back to the Venn diagram, all the starfish, the Venn diagram, and touching all the circles, and how smart I think you've been at touching all those things. And I think the thing that resonates the most for me in all of this is like the passion that you have for everything. Right. And so maybe one of the wrap up questions here is like, man, what is left to do? Like what's left for Guild Solutions to do, right? Because it seems like you're doing it all. I mean, do you know what that is, or is it you're just ready when it happens?
Yeah, I think so. Well, one thing I've always said is I never want to be the guy teaching in my 60s and 70s.
Okay.
Never want to be that guy. I want to be the guy that is operating a company now but I want to be owning companies later. As you know, there's a big difference in operating and owning.
Yes, I do.
And truthfully, I'm an owner operator right now. So my goal for the guild is simply to get that up and running. And I've already got a group of individuals that will run that, take that. I'll step back, of course, when the time is right. I still want to be involved to a certain capacity, but I don't want to be running everything. I want to turn that over. We've started GAS, which is Guild Applied Solutions. It's an R&D company where we create, it could be something as silly as a skull, and then we basically license out our IP to others. That's where my focus is right now with my business partner, Pete Coletta. And then I help Dalton with the media company. I'm a part owner in Breach Pop. And then obviously Pryme, where that goes is the moon and probably further than Artemis went. And so what I want to see for me in my life is I want my life's work to where I step back. We turn it into whether it's an S Corp or whatever the case is. And I want to focus on the leadership aspects, the instructional development aspects, and I want to empower others to truly be able to run with it. I think the greatest testimony in the world is not what you've done, but it's the legacy you leave.
I agree. And
if I could leave a legacy that's lasting, whether that's to my kids or to one of our instructors' kids, that's the thing that I look back. And Scott, I'll say one of my dreams, I've said this to all of my close friends. I said, when it's said and done and I get into my 70s and 80s in the twilight years, I hope the 90s, like my grandfather, we're sitting around a porch, a bunch of us were hopefully still alive. And we could just look at each other and not say a word and say, we did something that matters. And that's ultimately my goal, man. It's not to make millions. If that happens, cool. But I just want to keep pressing and see where the rabbit hole goes.
I love that answer. That resonates pretty big with me too. I think I feel the same way in a lot of ways. The interesting thing about that journey and that path is how many times you get punched in the face along the way, and then having to get yourself up, brush yourself off, and move forward to do whatever the next thing is in order to make that happen. And again, the connections that I have, the mutual connections that I have, that's all I hear about you, man. Like, this dude is he's on fire. He's a beast. He's constantly moving. He's overly humble. You're going to have to dig at him to get him to talk about himself a little bit, because he doesn't like to do that. And I just appreciate you, opening up and doing that with me today, for making the trip all the way here. I know you're super busy, just for however long we've been talking now. The fact that you take any time out of your day to come sit down across the table for me and just answer my questions and chat means a ton to me. And I appreciate you, man, for doing that. I
appreciate you. And thank you to your listeners, man, for those that stuck around. That means a lot. I don't think I'm anything special, but the fact that you would listen to a guy like me, and hopefully I brought some value to your life. And Scott, thank you so much for this opportunity just to let my voice get out there. Appreciate you.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up. Let's close it out, man. So if people want to find out more about the guild, right, and then maybe they want some guild love in their life, or they want to find a little bit more about Pryme, where do they go? Where's the best resources?
Cool. Yeah. Real easy. Go to the website, and that's just guildsolutionswithansgroup.com, guildsolutionsgroup.com. That's the website. It's got everything about it. We're very transparent. There's all of our bios. There's all the courses we offer. There's our course schedule. If you want more information, I can send you a course catalog. We've got a nice little layout. And if you really get serious, we'll send you an in-depth proposal, break it all down on Pryme Infill. It's just Pryme Infill with 1L.com. If you're a law enforcement officer or first responder, say book a demo, go to it, schedule whatever's good for your schedule, your time. Me or one of the boys will jump on there and we'll just break it down for you and help you out. And if it's something that's good for you, roll on. If it's not, thanks for still reaching out.
Right on, Shane, man. Well, this will be the last thank you. I tend to overdo this, but man, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on. Hopefully the people that are listening and made it this long took something away from this. I certainly did. Brought a lot of value. I learned a lot today, and I'll walk away from this thing thinking about some stuff. I'll probably have questions for you. So, cool. Yeah, don't be surprised if that phone starts dinging tomorrow and I'm like, hey, I didn't ask you this. What about this or that? I'll try not to bug you too much.